Let's go over these multiple choice questions about anaerobic respiration. Before we jump into the questions, let's take a look at this diagram that explains this process. Remember that aerobic respiration is going to need oxygen, and when there's not enough oxygen, the cells are going to typically switch into something called alcoholic or lactic acid fermentation. This is where we're going to recycle these molecules of NAD and NADH in order to facilitate glycolysis to keep working. Now remember that glycolysis only gives us 2 ATP molecules. However, I always like to tell my students it's better to make a little bit of ATP than no ATP. Here's the first question. If oxygen is not present in sufficient quantity, pyruvate molecules are converted into blank. The reason why this is an easier question is this is again just a memorization question where you have to memorize the 2 different types of pathways that anaerobic respiration can go through. And if we look at our answers, it's going to be A, ethanol and lactic acid. Another name for lactic acid is lactate, and ethanol is just the other type of molecule that's produced through anaerobic respiration. Here's the meeting question. Which condition would cause glycolysis to stop in a fermenting cell? So this question is a little bit more difficult because it's saying, hey, how would glycolysis stop? What characteristic would cause this process to actually stop? Low ATP levels. Nope, that wouldn't happen because that would actually start up glycolysis. High ADP levels. Again, no, that would actually cause glycolysis to occur more quickly. No regeneration of NAD. That sounds like our answer. If we don't have NAD, we can't facilitate glycolysis. That's the whole reason why we need alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation is to regenerate this molecule. So I think this is it. Let's check our last 2 here. Accumulation of pyruvate. Not really. I mean, some of these later molecules do inhibit earlier processes, but I like C as the better answer here. And then E, high CO2 concentrations. No, that wouldn't do it. This is why C is the best answer here. Here's our last question. One function of both alcohol and lactic acid fermentation is to blank. Now, there's not a lot of words here. Usually the harder questions have a lot more words. The reason why I chose this question for the hard one is that this concept of what's the whole goal, what's the whole role of the anaerobic processes, this is tough for students to understand. They don't remember why these actually go on. Remember that the whole goal is to take NADH and have it be oxidized back into NAD so it can go back to glycolysis. If we don't have enough NAD, glycolysis won't happen. So if we look at our answers, D here is the right choice. And this is, again, more of a memorization question. However, it's still a really tough concept for students to understand, or at least that when I was a teacher, I would see. This is just would be a hard question for them to really wrap their head around, but D is the right answer here.